Hi, welcome to RCKicks. On today's show, well, it's the Christmas special. Yes, it's 2 days before Christmas, and I've got just enough time to drop in a Christmas video. So I put out a post on the RCKicks Facebook group asking for questions and topics to discuss in the Christmas special. So I've gone through and looked at them all, and I've gathered a load together that we can actually talk through. So before we do that, because this is probably going to prattle on for quite a while, just get yourself a beer or a cup of tea if you don't drink the hard stuff. And then we'll go through each question or topic, and then we'll do a bit of a discussion. So this is just an easygoing one. So, okay, I think that pretty much covers everything. So let's go through some of the first questions. Right, the first one is from Peter, and he says, will Schumacher Racing release the Cat 2000 next? I'm going to say no. I think it's going to be the Boss Cat. The Works has obviously just dropped now, and it looks like it's been really popular. So I think the Boss Cat is going to come next. Then after that, maybe the 2000. Now, I'm pretty sure, my gut tells me that the Works has sold really well. It seems very popular. There's a lot of people talking about it. I've seen a lot of people posting that they're getting one, and I think they did a brilliant job. It's probably the release I'm the most excited about since the XLS, as it has all the bells and whistles of the Works, so it's perfect for anyone who goes vintage racing. Also, if you're thinking about getting a Cougar, it's definitely the one to get for sure. You get quite a bit for your money as well. You don't necessarily have to upgrade the slipper. You can use the one that's in the kit, so you don't have to buy that. So I think it ticks a lot of boxes, and it's also a gorgeous colour, so I think they did a brilliant job of it. If it's really successful, then maybe they might bring forward the Boss Cat, which would then mean they'd bring forward other cars as well, as I think if it sells more than they expected, it gets their attention. Which is kind of what we saw with like AE, for instance, when they started bringing out the RC10s again. They went, oh my God, this is selling well more. So suddenly they rolled into it, so it gets their attention. So that's my guess. But I have nothing to back it up. That's just me just guessing. And the next one is from Ron. Any chance of Schumacher re-releasing the XLS? I'm going to say no, nope, 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 nope. I don't think so. I think it was out for such a long time, and the kits were all sold off at the end, and there was a sale. And I can kind of understand where this is coming from, as Ron, I'm guessing, but you want to get yourself an XLS new in box, but the prices of the kits have gone up and they're really expensive. My advice would be buy one that's new built but never run. That would be my 10 pence worth about an XLS, as the build experience of the XLS is not fun at all. Now, if you've built other Schumachers in the past, vintage Schumachers in the past, then this will be fine. But if you're coming from, say, Kyosho, or you're coming from Tamiya, jumping into an XLS is going to be a little bit of a shock for you, and you probably won't enjoy it quite as much as you think. Once it's finished, I think you're going to love the buggy, especially if you drive it and run it. But the build experience is not that great, and a little bit of a pain. Next one is John. John writes, favourite and least favourite re-re's of 2024. Least favourite, you're going to be surprised at this one. I'm going to say it's the Yokomo. Yes, the Yokomo Super Dogfighter. When that came out, super excited about it. Obviously got it. Really like it as a shelf queen, but I wanted to drive it and take it racing, and I really didn't enjoy it. It needs a lot of work to get it to go well. I've only seen one going around the track really well. Obviously, they did the whole thing with the battery and the motors on the same side, which is all a bit weird from a weight distribution point of view. And I just didn't like the suspension, the whole short shocks at the back. It didn't really work for me. And I think that's what really disappointed me. As a shelf queen, I think it's gorgeous. I definitely need to put a new body on it and new wing, because I've damaged the wing. I've also done a whole chassis swap on it, and I've got some B 6.4 shocks for it to improve it. But I think I'm just going to retire it to being just a shelf queen. So that was the one that disappointed me the most, as I really was excited to get that one, and its performance didn't really back up in my mind what I thought it was going to be. The re-release that I'm most happy about and most excited for, well, it's a bit of a different one. It's a re-release of sorts, and that's the TrickBits YZ10R. That is a total animal of a car. It's one of my nicest vintage retro, if you want to call it, race buggies. It looks fantastic. It's gorgeous looking. It's high quality, but it also backs it up with being an amazing race buggy as well. And it's a joy to drive. So those are my two, probably. They're very close. You know, one is kind of like a evolution of the base of what it was originally from the Super Dogfighter. But yeah, the 91 is obviously coming out soon as well. Not sure if I'm going to get that. In the UK, they're really expensive for what you get. They don't feel good value at all. So I'm not sure if I'll get the 91. Depends how different it is from the Super Dogfighter that's already come out. But when they bring out the 93 or something like that, then maybe I'll skip that and jump straight to the 93. We'll just have to wait and see. Next is Chris. And Chris writes, with the Cougar 2 works out, what parts are you going to use on your race Cougar? Arms, drive shafts, etc. And then he goes on to say that a lot of the upgrades that I've done on my Cougar, they've all been discontinued and you can't get those parts anymore. So what would I do? Well, there's a few things that I would take from the works to put onto my buggy. The ones I want to get is the double front bearing hubs. Definitely going to put that on it. I did want to do the drive shafts, the alloy ones, frictionless or whatever it is, but they don't fit. Because the works has the diff in a slightly different place, it straightens out the drive shafts. And the Cougar has them at an angle, so they need to be longer. But apparently Schumacher are going to do a modification kit, so you will be able to buy them for that. Now, I would change what's required to move the diff to line up the drive shaft, as that's obviously a better way to go versus having them tilted. But I have an alloy housing on mine, and I have carbon side plates. So I don't really want to take all that off to replace it with plastic works ones, just to straighten out my drive shafts. I'm not that bothered. I would rather just wait for this modification and then just get the alloy drive shafts and fit those. They're probably the two. The other ones that I might try is the arms, the front arms and the rear arms from the works. Now, I've got upgraded arms on my Cougar already. They're very strong and I've crashed a lot, so they don't break at all. I want to check the weights. If the weights are vastly different between the two, then I will change to the works if they're much lighter. If there's not much in it, I'll probably just stick with what I've got already on that front. Next question is from Paul. And Paul writes, are you still planning on RCKicks travelling around the country, various clubs? Yes, I am. Unfortunately, life gets in the way. What do I mean by that? Well, if you've been watching the show for a while, you know that I've got a very, very old Mercedes-Benz that I've had since it was 2.5 years old, and it just ticked over 200,000 miles, and I maintained it all myself. Well, it got to the point where it was not viable for me to even fix it, and it just didn't make sense to fix everything that was slightly wrong with it. Even if I did it myself, was going to be like £1,000. So the car was not worth that. It's worth like £900. So it was better for me to put that £1,000 towards a new family car. And we only have one family car, so you can imagine the miles it does. So we decided to get a 2.5-year-old EV. And I crunched all the numbers, and for what we've saved in fuel from driving the old Mercedes-Benz, it basically pays for itself anyway, and it's a lot more reliable and it's newer. So we ended up buying an electric car. That we've had an electric car before. This is our second one. I had a company car that was electric, so we got rid of it. So unfortunately, I needed to put down a decent deposit to bring the monthly costs down. So the money that I had saved up for my van went to the family car. So that set me back to zero. Then we were kind of getting closer towards winter coming in anyway. So I was thinking, well, I'm not really going to be driving around the country and then going to shops in the winter. So I thought, well, I'll leave it and try and save up again. And then when it gets to like March, April time, just as we start to the clocks change, that I will lease a van. My plan is to try and save up enough for the deposit for the lease and try and get a year's worth of rental. I mean, I'm talking about a small van, a couple £100 a month, that kind of thing. Get a year's worth so I don't have to worry about it too much. And then go off travelling around the country. But it's a bit more complicated than that and a bit more expensive. There's insurance, obviously, to take into account. There's fuel. Then there's other things, logistic things, like if I'm going to be travelling and editing, I need to get a laptop. Then if I'm going to stay in the van a few times, I need to get a power bank and a few other bits. So it suddenly gets more expensive, like spending £400 on a power bank. And then other bits and bobs so that I can travel, stay in the van, edit and release as I go, as well as all that that entails. But that's my plan. Yes, definitely want to do it in next year, and then obviously do it a bit more over the summer. Will be a bit more fun than doing it through the winter in the UK. But I'm definitely doing it. I just got set back a little bit, so there we go. Next is Yan, and Yan says why she is already discontinued. Then he's posted a little picture of a TD4. So I'm guessing he wants to know why is the TD4, and I'm guessing the TD2 has been discontinued. Honestly, I don't know, but the TD4 has apparently. Why? I think it's mainly down to looks, and it had a few issues as well. The front dog bones used to pop out. That wasn't great. The plastic diff nut was a bit of a joke, as well as you had to buy the slipper, which was another £50 on top. And overall, I think it was the look. The whole Jetson style body just didn't really come across that well. When I built it, I was quite impressed with how they managed to incorporate quite a lot into the actual molded plastic chassis. I've actually got one. I've got a yellow chassis new in box kit sitting around there, and I've also got a TD2 as well, new in box. I sold off the ones I built on the show, but I actually bought 2 new in box ones cheap. Next one is from Scott. Carpet racing. As a driver / car builder, do you like racing 4-wheel drive or 2-wheel drive? Well, I drive 4-wheel drive and 2-wheel drive, modern and vintage. 4-wheel drive personally is much easier. It's much more forgiving. My PR SB401, that car drives better than I can drive it. So it can handle the stupidness that I do. Very strong, very fast. Throw it into a corner, don't do it properly, and the car will just, yeah, no problem, and just go around the corner. I prefer 2-wheel drive because it makes you a better driver. I think the 4-wheel drive, especially, the modern stuff, will make you fast around the track, obviously, but it won't make you a better driver, as the car is making up for your not so great driving. Whereas when you go to 2-wheel drive, if you don't drive it properly, it shows up a lot more. So I think you learn more in 2-wheel drive. And then if you want to go from 2-wheel drive to 4-wheel drive later on, I think it's easier, but it is harder to do 2-wheel drive. But I like and prefer 2-wheel drive. I would rather do well driving 2-wheel drive than do well driving 4-wheel drive. That makes any sense. John writes, what is the most valuable / sought after vintage car out there now? Well, there's a whole genre of very rare cars, and it depends on, there's a lot of niche cars that are very hard to find and very expensive that most people don't know about. The main ones that people kind of do know about would be the Tommy Intruder. I think 10th Technologies Predators have become more well known. They're very expensive. From Tamiya, you're probably looking at the Blazing Blazer. A new built, never run Blazing Blazer is probably up there. A new in box one. Even rough ones are doing £1,000. Prices have obviously come down a bit from stupid 2 years ago, but they're still really expensive. And then there's a few other really niche. Is it PB Racing? Some of those are quite rare. Right, what's next? Neil says, who will be the next year's F1 champion? I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say it's going to be, I'm going to say Norris. Yeah, I reckon it's going to be McLaren. I put some money on Lando being the next champion. Why do I say that? Well, I think Lewis going to Ferrari is not going to perform. Charles is definitely going to outperform Lewis. Nothing wrong with Lewis. Big fan of Lewis. It's just he's coming down. His speed is coming down now as he's getting older. I can see why they did it because of his brand. But I would have kept Carlos personally. Red Bull is on the way down because they've lost Adrian and a few other. They've had a bit of a brain drain. Red Bull with all the shenanigans that are going on. Max is just going to get more and more frustrated, I think. So it's not like he won't see him on the podium, but he just won't be dominating like he used to. So I think he'll be dropping away. McLaren have got a bit of momentum now, and their car is genuinely fast. Leclerc could do something if Ferrari don't screw it up for him. The next one is, are we still recording? Yes, we are, is Andrew. And Andrew writes, will you venture out to some more tracks to race? Maybe, dare I say, some outdoors. Andrew races at the local track that I race at, and yeah, the running joke of I just don't like dirty cars, especially in the rain and the grass, and oh god, yeah, I can't stand that. Well, obviously when I get the van and I go travelling, my way of getting around it, as I have a real problem, I like neat, nice cars, is I have to put them into different slots with me. If it's an out driver, basher, whatever, it's allocated that's what it becomes, that's fine. If it's a shelf queen, it becomes a shelf queen. So I have got cars that are abused and filthy, but they become those cars. What I don't like and I can't cope with is taking a shelf queen and then taking it out and then getting it all dirty, then having to clean it all up and put it back on the shelf. It just freaks me out. But my plan to get around this, to go out and drive on carpet, drive on grass and dirt and stuff like that, is I will buy race buggies and they will become outdoor cars, and that way I won't worry about them being dirty. Yes, I'll service them, maintain them, but I won't trying to make them back into shelf queens every time I take them out and run them. That will just annoy the life out of me and I won't have much fun. It's just the way I'm wired. I like neat and tidy cars, but then I do have cars that are, I've got some RTRs that I drive around and they're all dirty, and that's just what they are. Right, the next one is Paul. And Paul writes, looking forward to some more full build videos. The new year, especially Tamiya, Kyosho, Team Associated, Yokimo and X-Ray. Yep, I've got loads more builds to come. I've got, sitting here right now, I've got the J. Halsey RC10, got to do that. I've got the RC10T to do that. I've got an X-Ray race buggy, which is the XB2. I've got that to do. What else have I got? And I've got a few others that are waiting to be built as well. So yes, there will be lots of builds on the show. Builds take a lot of time and effort and don't really give you a good return, but I like doing them. So there isn't many bigger RC channels that do builds anymore. Most people, it's ready to runs, as doing ready to runs is a much more lucrative and easier workload for a YouTuber. But I kind of do what I like, and I do like doing builds, even though people don't like to watch them that much. Next one is Brian, and Brian writes, have you built over 100 kits yet? I think I've built 50. Yeah, definitely not 100. I think I must have done like 30 odd, 30, 35. I don't know, but assume, yeah, maybe I do 30, because you think 10 builds a year. Well, that's getting on for one a month. So yeah, so 3 years, 30, 35 builds, give or take, would be my guess. So I'm miles behind you, Brian. Next one is Simon, and he writes, what is your honest opinion if Tamiya were to re-release the Porsche 959 for their anniversary? If they leave it alone and they just produce it and they tinker with the chassis, make it a bit stronger, use different plastics, composite plastics, maybe add a bit more plastics around some of the weak spots, and then release it as an anniversary kit, it'll be the best selling re-release that they've ever done. Guarantee it. Will they do it? I guesstimate 30% chance would be mine, even though it's a complete no-brainer and it makes total sense. Whether they do it, you can never plan this with Tamiya. Tamiya just do the random stuff that they want. Oh, each knows. They tend to just look at the domestic business, and then they produce it for the domestic, and then they try and sell it as a global, even if their global sales are bigger than their domestic sales. That's just a traditional Japanese company. Simon, when will we see you finish the big rig? My truck, I'm guessing what he's talking about. Well, only the driver and the dashboard needs finishing on it, but what I really want to do is I want to get a trailer for it, as the idea was to have the trailer along the back there and then have someone do a professional logo on the trailer and then paint it up so it's part of the set. That's the kind of plan. Whether I'll do it, they're actually quite expensive. I was quite surprised just how much you pay for the trailers, and then paying a professional painter to do some kind of mural on the side of it. Yeah, but that's my plan. But it does fully work. All I have to do is plug a battery into it and all the sound works and all the lights work and everything. It's just when I finished it off, The actual sound box that Tamiya does takes up a lot of the cockpit, so it needs to be pushed to the back to get the driver, and then you've got to modify the driver cockpit a little bit, as you're not supposed to have both, but you can make both work with a little bit of modifying. So that's all, but there's no point me making a video just on that. Is not enough, so I'll wait until I get a trailer of some sort, but they're really expensive. Next is Franco. Will we ever see the return of the RCKicks meetups? I did quite a few of them. I did 3, was it last year? Unfortunately, there's a few factors that make it difficult, challenging. The first one is the UK weather is about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. Even in the middle of August, you could have torrential downpour ruin the whole day. So that means realistically, you've got to do it indoors to guarantee that people are going to have a good experience. As there's no way loads of people are going to turn up with vintage cars. It's absolutely belting it down. It's 13 degrees outside and no one's going to drive their cars. Everyone's going to have a terrible time and it's going to be a total flop. I can't then just cancel the day but give refunds to everybody, because I'll still have to pay for the track and everything, and it would be a disaster. So indoors is the only way to really guarantee that everyone's going to be having a good time that day. The problem is in the UK, there's only a few indoor tracks and they're not big. So the amount of people that I can have at an indoor track has a cap on it, and the cap is too low to really make it viable. It just about, if all goes to plan, it just about kind of covers its costs, especially if I have to travel, we have to stay in a hotel, we have to have food, you know, it just ends up being too expensive, because obviously you've got to rent the track. Obviously some tracks are more expensive than others, and then it helps that we have someone like our Rochester RC came along and did a few sponsors, like gave some kits that we gave away when we did the quizzes and stuff. And then if I do a couple of raffles, it brings in a little bit more money and it kind of balances out. But the workload involved is more, it's more trouble than it's worth. That said, Will from Rochester RC, obviously they've just opened an indoor track, about doing one down there, that he was kind enough to say, oh, well, we could have it there without charging me a fee, which then takes a big chunk out of it, which makes it a little bit more profitable, because obviously we would have to travel down, we would have to get there very early, then we probably end up staying in the evening in a local hotel and then driving back, because to do a whole day of that and then drive home in the evening is a big ask. So maybe we'll do that down at Rochester RC. The only thing is that to try and get the numbers that I need, I'd like to be able to get sort of like 80 people in there, and it'd be a bit tight. Also, the track is quite small, so if anybody's got any more modern buggies, the track is a little bit too small for that. It's kind of more suited to like M chassis. So whether he's going to expand the track or not, that would make it more viable. I just have to roll with it, but I don't really plan on doing them, as it's just too much workload for no real return. And if something goes slightly wrong, it would be an absolute disaster. So there's that side of it. The next one is Daniel, and Daniel asked, is the vintage RC scene moving away from restorations and rebuilds of actual vintage cars to being almost all about re-releases? Yes, I think it is, for a few reasons. Restoring vintage cars is very expensive. People sell parts, especially mint parts, for lots of money, and it just becomes so expensive to restore a vintage car. Now there's restore and then there's restore. Restore is in replace the broken bits and then just have it, and then do an aftermarket body and aftermarket decals is one thing. Restoring it to what I call a shelf queen, to a high standard as if it's brand new, is very hard and very expensive, and also it takes a long time. It's better, personally, to hunt around and buy a vintage new in box one and then build it, especially from what I do on the show, because of time. If I buy a vintage new in box, I've got it, I know that I can build it, and then I can finish it and it's done, and then I can release a video. If I buy something and then spend 3 months looking for parts, it takes too long and I have to put too much money into it. And then if I was going to do that on a regular, I would need 3 or 4 of these going on in the background all the time while I'm constantly hunting for these parts. And then at the end, I end up spending almost the same as a new in box one. So what I tend to do is I'll hunt around. If I see a good value new inbox vintage kit, I'd rather just buy that and do it. Steve writes, best sources of information related to the setups of racing buggies, RC10B7, X-Ray, blah, blah, blah. So there's a couple of channels that I have used for my B6.4 and my B7. I can't remember the names of them, so I'm going to put them below, but these two channels have been really good. And I tend to listen to what they say, and then I'll adjust my car on some of their recommendations, and then I'll tinker a little bit. I have found that for my B6.4, some of the setup of carpet track I've transferred across to my B7 that works. Like, because I run on the same local track that's a certain sort of size, and I changed the chassis on my B6.4 to a short chassis, the dirt one. I did the same on the B7, definitely helps with the rotation. So there's lots that I've transferred across. So once I kind of learned what works on my B6.4, I've done that again on my B7, and it's not like a hard and fast rule, but it does tend to work quite a lot. But the big change has been changing the tyres. We kind of had the cactus yellows on the rear and the cut staggers on the front, and now we've migrated across and we've got those new Schumacher bobbly tyres, and that changes the car dynamics a lot, so it means readjusting the car again. Next is Steve, and Steve says, how far can you go modifying an RC car and still call it its box name / chassis name? And basically he's talking about my Triggers broom of the Cougar. I basically changed 95% of it. Me personally, there's a difference between upgrading a part and modifying it. Modifying it means putting totally different parts on or cutting it, but upgrading an arm to another arm, the chassis, yeah, the chassis on my Cougar is now carbon, but it's still the same shape as the original one. So I changing out 95% of it, if it still has the chassis, the body, and you know, that's fine. But yeah, you could take it to the point like with my Clodbuster. My Clodbuster, apart from the two axles and that's it. The two axles is the only thing left. Yeah, that's a stretch to call it a Clod, because all the buzz up there, look at it now. And the tyres. No, did I change the tyres on it? I think I did change the tyres as well. So the rims and the axles. So the whole chassis, all the suspension, all the shocks, the tyres, the body is all not Clod. So that is basically, you're better off calling that a Clod axle monster truck. but it's whatever it is to you, really, at the end of the day. Simon writes, what surprise releases do you think we will see from the likes of Kyosho, Tamiya, Schumacher in 2025? So Kyosho, yeah, I reckon we're going to get a long wheelbase mid. Will it be the Toms? I hope so. Honestly, don't know. Kind of makes sense for them to do the Toms. I think it would sell really well. If they bring out the Toms came with 2 sets of rims and tyres. Will they do that? Probably not. I think they should, as that's part of the quirk. That would sell very well for them if they actually do the Toms. I have to wait and see, but I hope so. And I think 2025 is about the right time for them to do it. Next one is Rob. Rob writes, is the young generation into RC, or is it just only us 60s to 90s kids? I think all the new inbox collectors out there buying 2 to 3 of the same kit, hoping for long-term investments. Will there even be buyers for it in the future? I've just decided to build all my special kits for my own enjoyment, as I don't believe there's any point in keeping them new in box. I don't believe there's a market for it after our generation. Just thoughts, what do you think? Well, it's a really good topic, and I've always said, if you're looking for investments, don't buy RC. My investments are not in RC. My investments are in the stock market and funds that I'm getting much bigger returns. It doesn't matter. Pick the best kit that's ever performed over a certain amount of period. It's a terrible investment. You know, you're talking, you should be looking at making 6-7% a year on top of, not like, oh, I'll leave it for 20 years and I might get double my money, because inflation erodes it by 3% a year anyway, or more. So don't buy for investment purposes. Buy for collection because you enjoy collecting it. If you take joy out of buying a new in box, and you take genuine joy out of looking at the boxes, opening them up and looking at them all in packets, that's fine. You're taking joy from them. If you take joy from building them, which is me, I build my kits. Yes, it loses money there and then, but I'd like the enjoyment of it. As to me, it doesn't become a kit until it's built. Otherwise, it's just a load of parts in a box. Nice looking box, but just a load of parts. It becomes something when you build it. And also when you put effort into it, it becomes yours, and then that's my value. So that's why I build most of the cars that I have. I don't have a big new in-box collection at all. It's just some that I've just not got around to, or I got cheap. Now, as for the whole RC dying off kind of thing, I look at what's ahead of us. And trains, Hornby trains, that's the generation before. Like my father's generation was really into trains. They are struggling a lot. Hornby has been like on the down trend for a long time. So like share prices and stuff like that, and they've been bailed out loads and loads of times. And yeah, who is buying trains now? Yes, there is some youngsters involved in it, but not enough to really sustain it. So do I think it will be the same for RC? A big chunk of it? Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's going to be tomorrow. I don't think we're that old. I mean, I've just turned 50, so hopefully I've got another 20 years. So it's not like the RC market is just going to disappear in the next 5 years. But will it do? Yes, I think it will do. I think the connection and the nostalgia is based from when you're a youngster. Like today, for instance, my son, he's going to be very nostalgic for PlayStation 5s and that kind of thing. So it's different. So yeah, what we see as very attractive and very desirable today will definitely disappear into time. Just that's how it works. I don't think there's a big enough following behind it to like have youngsters wanting RC10s. I honestly just don't think so. But it's not something that happens overnight. It happens over years as the market slowly quietens down. As companies stop making cars, then the desirability is still there because they're not making them anymore. And then over time, more cars start to come on the market as people start passing on, and then they just fizzle out, and that's it. That's the circle of life. But don't buy RCs for investment purposes. Next is Timothy. Any ideas how big the hobby is? Any ideas how big is the hobby compared to the 80s and 90s back then? What percentage of us go club racing, bashing, or just collecting shelf queens? What are the sales charts like? Well, then he goes on about, well, we don't know. We can get a judge of how well a kit sells. If it's sitting languishing on the shelf, it gives you an idea. If it's sold out everywhere, it gives you an idea. But do they hit their targets? We don't know. We never see the figures. They're not like publicized, so we honestly don't know. Obviously, some kits are and some kits aren't, and then some kits are replenished, and then you have some kits that are very desirable at the beginning. Everyone grabs them, then they're desirable, then they release a whole second round batch, and then there's not that many people left. The classic example of that was the Top Force Evo. The Top Force Evo, when it first came out, everyone was grabbing it. It was amazing. And then they reproduced it, another batch and another batch. And then they were everywhere. And now you can get them at a really good discount because they saturated the market of the people that wanted Top Force Evos. Is it bigger now than then? It's really hard to tell. It's different. Very, very different. They probably sell more, because the market of people that they sell to has more funds. How many cars did you have when you were a youngster? 2, 3? Well, look around. I mean, obviously this is excessive, but I'm pretty sure most RC fans now who are adults have way more cars than they did when they were young. So you could kind of say there's more cars sold now than ever. So the unit sales are up, I guess. So the battery died on the camera, so I had to charge it. So it's now about 4 hours later than what you just saw. So sorry if there's any continuity issues. The lighting's different as I charged it and went off and done a load of other jobs, and then I've come back. So we'll carry on regardless. And my beer seems to have disappeared, and now I'm on vodka and Red Bull. There you go. So the next one is Steve. Hi, Merry Christmas. My question would be, one, do you think it's worth doing the 4-ish on the squash van as I have one for Christmas? I'm guessing what he means by that is the 4-wheel steer. I would definitely say no. I wouldn't bother. Doing 4-wheel steering is more complicated than you think. Not from just putting another servo on the back, but you've got to dial in the rates correctly. So you need a transmitter that can do that, as you don't want to have 20 degrees turn on the front, 20 degrees turn on the back. You just flip over. You only need a few degrees at the back to make a big difference. So you need to set the rates up to be different. Also, you need a really good rear servo, because if the rear servo does not return to exactly where you want it, you'll get a lot of wandering. So you definitely have to have a good servo on the back. So for that, I would say don't bother. It's fun, simple chassis to drive. So save your money. It's not going to give you anything of real value apart from learning how to do the channel mix for the servos. If you want to learn how to do that and you've got the right transmitter to do it, then yes. But performance-wise, God, no, not at all. 2, how have you and your family found it with you being full-time on YouTube? Well, it's been a good few years now that I've been doing this full-time. Pros and cons. The job I used to have was quite a serious job. That I used to work for a Japanese photonics company and doing a lot of medical equipment and installing it in the NHS and India and all kinds of random other places. So the stress side of it and the travel was very, very high. The travel was insanely high. I was out constantly, but when I wasn't out, I was doing office hours. Anyway, so my son, I didn't really see a lot of him when he was growing up, as I was just always away, never got to take him to school or anything like that. But being that I do this now for the last 4 or so years, I took my daughter to school every morning, walked her to school, picked her up, and that was fantastic. So that was really good to be able to do that. Being self-employed is very different to being employed. As in being employed, you know pretty much what you're going to get every month, and it's the same. Whereas being self-employed, it fluctuates massively from month to month, depends what's going on. Also, when you're employed, you get paid by one employer. Whereas when you're self-employed, money comes in from lots of different areas, be that from YouTube, Patreon, raffle, selling stuff, cars come in sometimes for a review that are free that I can then sell on afterwards sometimes, that then brings in a bit of money. So money sort of drips in and out from different places. So you kind of got to roll with it. As well as being self-employed, you've got to do all your own tax returns, and you've got to do your own tax savings and all that. So everything that comes in has to be documented, everything that goes out has to be documented, and then the books have to balance, and then you have to submit all your tax returns afterwards. So you need software to do that. I don't have an accountant, but I have some online software that I use that saves me loads. Also, you have to have lots of insurances. There's lots of behind the scenes expenses that you don't see from when I do my travel, or when I do all my account paperwork has to be on a computer, has to be backed up to the cloud in case it gets stolen or it gets damaged and I lose all my accounts. There's loads of layers to that cost money every month, as well as all the software licenses that you have to pay for, insurance and business insurance and all kinds of fun stuff like that. Obviously the wages was a massive drop. It's slowly improved. The main thing that's become a real challenge that really jeopardizes the channel, and still does right now, is inflation. Because for some reason, everything seems to have gone up in value and cost, but YouTube's ad revenue sense doesn't seem to have gone up at all. So I basically earn the same now as I did 2 years ago from the videos I do, but yet everything's gone up in the UK by 20-odd%. So that's the big issue. So it's a lot harder. I have to be more careful. than before. Whereas when I first started, my goal was if I can just achieve £1,000 a month, then I've made it. And even now I can do over that. It's still much more, it's even harder than it was trying to get to that target, as being over that is still real challenging, as everything is so much more expensive. Everything's doubled or tripled in the last few years. So that's what's made it really difficult, which is annoying because it has nothing to do with viewers. It has nothing to do with the channel. It's just what's happened around the world. And for some reason, YouTube likes to keep all its money and not give it to small channels like ours. Anyway, so like most things in life, there's pros and cons. The other thing that's brilliant about it is being self-employed. I pick and choose the hours I work. Some days I can't face it, so I take the day off and then go and do other stuff. And then other days I'll work 15-hour days, or I'll work on the weekends, and it's flexible from that side. So the other side of it is obviously you're more self-sufficient. When you work for an employer, you think you're safer, but you're not, because your job could be terminated at any point and then you're out on your ear. Whereas being self-employed, you build up your business and you control it, and it's, you know, you make decisions that change things. Whereas you could go and work for a company for 5 years and then suddenly get made redundant and you're out on your ear roll. So would I recommend it? 100%. Yeah, definitely. Being an employee is great to raise money, but long term, it's a really bad decision. So I would highly recommend being self-employed if you can do it. But you've got to be disciplined. The next one is Dean, and he basically says, do you think the cars of our youth, when re-released in, say, 2010 onwards, really captures that same moment when we first saw them as children? I would say more so, because when you first saw them is when you first fell in love with them, and you used them, and you played with them, and you broke them, and you fixed them, and you raced them, and you clicked, you know, whatever you did with it, you modified it, you tinkered with it constantly. That's when you kind of fell in love with it. Then we skip to where we are now, and I would say we look on them more fondly now because of our memory. So we have that nostalgia aspect where we didn't have nostalgia back in the day. You got your car and you probably abused the living daylights out of it, and it turned out to be a bit of a wreck when you finished with it. But today we've got the nostalgia aspect and the funds to be able to pick cars. And then we have cars that we never had that we always wanted, like the Avantis. I remember looking at an Avanti and thinking, I would love one of those, never going to get one. So now I have a few of them. So now I look back and I'm like, wow, I got the car that was in that magazine or was in that Tamiya book. So I'd say it's just the same. Probably more so because you always look back with fond memory. So I think we now like them more than ever, really. Gareth, what is your take on RC drifting? It seems to be a rapidly growing part of the hobby. I do like the way that the drift cars are the bodies. I like the detail they put into the bodies, having the rear bumper removed, having the whole concept of taking panels off and being able to show the inside panel. So like you get the front wings removed. So when someone makes a polycarbonate body, they actually don't do the wing, they do the inner wing. And then when you paint it up, it looks like it's been removed. Really like that. And then some of the bodies are really stunning of all the Japanese cars. So they can look really nice. And then some people go put more detail on them with a driver, with the steering wheel moving. There's nowhere around here for me to actually do drifting. I've actually got a drift chassis, an old one that was gifted to me. But there's nowhere around here where I can actually have a go. I live out in the countryside, so there's not many. My local club did do a drifting meetup. But I didn't go to that one. That was like a one-off thing, I think. But if there was something a bit more local, I'd give it a go. It's harder than it looks. Aaron says, having just bought a Vanquish, if you could talk about some of your projects. Had hoped to use the upgrades from one of your videos, but the company seems to have closed down. Maybe a good time to speak about some of the small companies that make awesome parts that we don't know of. One rule that I have, which I shouldn't tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyway, is what I tend to do. If I see a small company producing something that is an upgrade or is a chassis mod or something for one of my cars, I'll jump on it. And the reason I'll jump on it is because it could be gone. And it tends to be like someone will do a small batch of something and then it's gone. And then you can't get them again, ever again. Someone will make 20 of them. There's no real profit in them. They do it as a love passion project and then they're gone. Having those little parts and having your cars with those extra kind of rare parts on makes it more cool as time goes on. So I tend to do that when I can. If I see a little project happening, I'll tend to get involved and get one if I can, depending on obviously if I've got the money, depends what it is. But if there's a small run of it, I'll definitely do it. I would recommend that. As down the line, I think if it's discontinued and you then sold it on, you would definitely get your money back. Not a profit, just that you've got more chance of getting your money back. Don't buy RC for profit. Next one is Michael, and Michael says, how do you decide what your content is going to be for your videos? Sorry, I've got such an itchy nose tonight. So this one is a really good one, and I do get asked this one quite a lot. Obviously, if you watch the show, you probably notice that my videos can be a bit of everything. I go from one thing to another, and the reason for that is I like to be interested in something. It's very hard for me to stay motivated to just do stuff I'm not interested in. I do sometimes do a product that I'm not personally interested in, but I can only do one or two. I couldn't just get 10 RC products that I'm not interested in, just bang out videos every day. Can't do it. Just doesn't interest me at all. And then I think after a while it will come across that way. Whereas doing stuff I'm actually interested in and I like makes better content. I wish I could say that I have a whole board planned out month with projects and they all seamlessly go together. Doesn't work like that at all. Things unfold as they do. I don't have 4 videos ahead. I don't work that way. I produce too much content to be able to be 4 or 5 videos ahead. You know, I used to do a video every 2 days. I calmed that down a little bit I couldn't sustain that. So now it's every sort of 4 days. But you can imagine trying to make enough content to be 2 weeks ahead. I just can't do it. So you tend to get it as it comes out. Also, I think it keeps it current, that you're getting stuff that's more like it's not been sitting on my editing hard drive for 6 months. Now, this is very different. Every YouTuber is very different. I know Kevin, for instance. Kevin has hundreds of videos, and some videos will sit there for a year as he finishes them off. So when you see a video drop from Kevin, it could be a video that's taken a year. And he has lots of them, and that's how he works. Obviously, it's very successful for him, but for me, I don't tend to work that way. Also, it depends on how complex your videos are and how much budget you've got. Anyway, thanks so much. Have a great Christmas. There'll be loads more coming in 2025 from RCKicks. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Subscribing, there's 63% of people that watch the show aren't even subscribed. It costs you absolutely nothing, but it really helps us out. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.